Hello everyone! Today I want to talk about the XTouch by Behringer, especially when used as a DAW controller with any DAW on market. There are some issues I want to talk about and how I solved them. First of all, perhaps you know that there are different ways of using the XTouch controller. For instance, you can work with a normal X32 mixer. So for instance, if you got a X32 rack mixer, you can use the controller to control these mixer, which is useful because you don't need to use the X32 edit app and you don't need to use a tablet. So you could use this XTouch controller with a mixer, and when you configure the mixer within for instance this rack unit, you can write the scribble strips and you can also define the colors of the scribble strips. This is very helpful, I think, because I myself own an X32 Compact, and it's even it's a good idea to have color on the scribble strips because it's much easier to organize all your tracks when you have color indication. So these scribble strips on the XTouch are more or less the same than on the X32 console, the large one, or the X32 Compact. And when using these XTouch with a mixer, everything is working fine. But when it comes to use the XTouch as a DAW controller, there's an issue. So what I'm talking about. If you control your DAW with this controller, you can write the track names in the DAW and they will appear on the scribble strips. This is very fine. But when it comes to the color indication, nothing is going to happen. So I'm going to show you with my DAW what I'm talking about. So I'm working with Magic's Samplitude or Sequoia. It's the same in this case. So when I go into load a project, it will take some seconds. So here we are, and we can have a look on the mixer as well. Here we are. So there are lots of tracks, and I indicated them with colors within the DAW, and I indicated them with the writing as well. So the first step we have to do, and I think it's important to do it because it's much easier to understand how the application, my little software application I wrote, works when we go through configuration first. I know that the configuration is not exactly the same with any DAW, but it's more or less how do you say it in English? Oh, it's not so easy. It's quite the same. It's quite the same. And I think you have to figure out how to configure your controller with your DAW, because it's important that it's working as you want it to work first, and then we can go to my application to see how I solved the color problematic over there. So the first we have to do in Samplitude or Sequoia, we have to press the Y button and we go to hardware controller, and we have to add a new hardware controller. So we say add new, and then you see there are lots of presets. The one you have to choose is Mackie Control. I did that, and then I decided to adjust this preset a little bit. I added the fader calibration for my controller, which I think is possible in other DAWs as well. And then I also decided to reassign all the knobs on my controller. With MIDI control, most functions work fine. The transport control works fine, all the faders and the rotary encoders work fine. But when it comes to the buttons, you will see that the original printed layout, I put this away for a moment, doesn't meet your needs and doesn't meet the specifications of your DAW. So I decided to reassign these knobs. I don't want to talk about this in detail now because this is not the topic of this video. And I made myself a new overlay, put it over the original one so it fits my needs and everything works as I want it to work. So that's because I don't take the MIDI control now, but I take the MIDI control XTouch fader. It's named Fader Kalibrierung in German. It's fader calibration. So, and then I have to assign the MIDI port, which is XTouch BA for basses. In this case, I can't take it. Okay, here we are, and we see we have our first bank over here. It's fader number 1, fader number 2, and so on. Fader number 8, and we can say, okay, we switch the bank, and then the next fader, and so on and so on. Everything is working well, but no colors, of course. Why not? Because besides the problem that I think you can even have, I guess, 16.7 million colors within the DAW to color your track, and the XTouch is only able to represent 7 colors, especially 7 colors with black, to be honest. There is no possibility of transporting the information on MIDI control. It's not foreseen to do that. We are using MIDI for the communication between the controller and the software, and MIDI doesn't have the possibility to transport these color informations. I want to go back to the hardware configuration to show you something else. We defined the XTouch controller as our hardware, and within options there is another checkbox called absolute. When you check this box, it's no longer possible to switch channels but only banks. So if you want to do that, so that you're be sure that you have always a grid of 8 channels on your controller, so 1 to 8, 9 to 16, 17 to 24, and so on, you can check this box, but then you're not able to switch channels, you're only able to switch banks. I show you how this is going to work. So we can go to the first bank, and when we press channels, nothing is going to happen. So it's always 8 channels counting up or counting down. When you let me just go to that menu, uncheck the box, so you can have 1 channel, 2 channels, 3 channels, and so on. That would mean if you, for instance, go 2 channels further and then press the bank button, it will shift by exactly 8 tracks, so it's not 3 to let me count 10, but it's 11 to 18. So it's a matter of how you're going to work. Both is possible, but I mentioned this because this checkbox will be present in my software. We talk about it a little bit later as well, so you should know what it's going to do. We leave it unchecked, so we can switch between the channels and we can switch between the fader banks as well. And before we come to the solution how to add color to the scribble strips, we have to talk about another thing. We have to talk about what's going to do when we use more than one controller. So let's go a little bit far away with my camera. So my configuration, as you can see, is one touch controller in the middle and one extender on left and one extender on the right side. I want to talk as a normal configuration in my case, not because it's normal by nature, but because I defined this configuration extender, XTouch, extender as normal, because I'm going to work with this normally, and it's easier to understand how the software is going to work later on. If you can remember, this is the so-called, for me, normal configuration. Extend on that side, XTouch in the middle, and the second extender on the other side. When it comes to configure 3 units, 2 extenders and 1 XTouch, you will get aware of, maybe you get aware of another problem. When you connect them via USB, which I did first, both extenders will configure themselves with MIDI ports which are exactly named the same. So this will be XTouch, this will be extender, and this will be extender. In my DAW I can rename the MIDI ports, but when it comes to hardware configuration, the software is always using the original MIDI names. So we have a problem because as I mentioned, they are named the same. You can figure out which MIDI port belongs to which controller, and you can do it. It's going to work, but, unless you close the application and restart your DAW, because then you have to start from the beginning. Because the controllers do not know to which MIDI port they should connect when the application starts. So this was a little bit annoying for me, and I decided to try another way. And I decided not to connect the controllers via USB, but via rtpMIDI. rtpMIDI, I think it's the real-time protocol, is nothing else than MIDI via Ethernet. All the units have got, beside their USB port, an Ethernet port as well. And I think we should take us 1 or 2 minutes to look on that configuration, because if you do it perhaps for the first time, it may be helpful to see what you have to do. So we're going to close this project for a minute. Let me have a look. So it's away. When you want to configure one of these controllers, I think maybe you know, you have to switch it off. Press the select button of the first fader, hold it pressed and switch on again. And it awakes in configuration mode. I'm going a bit closer with my camera so it's easier for you to see what I'm going to do. Okay, I think that's it. So on the first rotary encoder, you can choose the protocol, and you have MIDI control, MACI control, UE control, and so on. X control, for instance, is a protocol when you want to operate an X32 rack mixer or another mixer out of the X32 family, and we are going to use the MACI control, which is MC. So we worked with USB, or I worked with USB in the very beginning, and now we're going to change that to network. So now it's important, we have the network mode, we have to change that to slave with the 4th rotary encoder. Then we select DHCP off, and then we can adjust our IP address manually. It's highly recommended to do the IP configuration manually, because you can do DHCP, of course, but earlier or later you're going to get into trouble, because perhaps your router is hiding another IP address from time to time. So it's a better idea to fix that. So I made good experiences with assigning manually fixed IP addresses, and So I did here. I decided to take the 140 at the end, and we can do it on other controllers as well. So let's go. Okay, so we switch it off, push the first select button, switch it on again, and here we are. Okay, so we see it's, I go back here, it's slave or on all three controllers. We have DHCP off, DHCP off, and DHCP off, and then we have dedicated IP addresses, the 140 over there, the 141 on my left controller, and the 142 on my right controller. So when we have done this, we only have to press the select button again, and it's stored, it's saved. So now the unit is waiting for a connection, and to establish a connection between this unit and your DAW, you have to install a little program which is freeware. It's rtpMIDI by, I think, Mr. Ericsson, which is very helpful, and which is going to act as a bridge between our Ethernet connected devices and our DAW. So if you downloaded it, I'm going to provide all the links you need in the description down the video. We're going to open rtpMIDI, and I already configured it. Hang on just a minute, I have to adjust something here. Okay. So I'm going to deconnect this first, and you'll see that the IP addresses appear again on my controllers. I don't want to go into the configuration of this software in detail. When you download it, there are several advices on the web page, so it's not very complicated to set this up. You have to create 3 sessions, and in every session you can include one of the controllers. The controllers, as you can see here, are defined by the IP address. It's the port 5004 we used. I think this port was also mentioned when we configured the panel. So it's a unique address. And when you did this, you have to. It's important to have 3 sessions, and in every session you include one panel. And the name, the local name, you can use here. It's up to you how to name this. So you have the possibility of having different names for both extenders. So the basis I named XTouch BA for basis for the XTouch, and the left one is extended 1 and the right one is extended 2. And when you connect this by checking the box, you will see that the IP address is going to disappear on the dedicated panel. This is the XTouch, this is the extended 1, and this is the extended 2. The good news are that you have to do it once, because every time, we can close that by the way, every time you're going to start Windows. Oh yeah, I didn't mention that I'm working on the Windows station. I think you've seen that already. So I'm not experienced with Mac, so I can only tell about Windows, but I think it's going to work on Mac as well. When you close this, as we did, and you restart Windows, it will wake up with the checkboxes. So you don't need to do it every time you power up your system. It's going to connect automatically. Maybe it takes a little bit time, even when you switch it off when Windows is running and you switch the panel then back on again, it may take some time. So if it's too long for you, just uncheck the boxes and check them again, and then they will connect immediately. Okay. So now we going back to our DAW again. I lost it. Here it is. All right. Okay. So what have we done? We configured our main controller, but we didn't configure our both extenders. So we have to do this first. Hard to controller, and we're going to delete this. So anyway, goodbye. So when we define the controllers, we always do it from left to right. So our first controller is the first extender. This is the second one, and the right extender is the third one. In Samplitude or Sequoia, you can have different configurations. The configuration I'm now talking about is to use all three controllers as one logical unit. That means if we're going to switch banks, it will affect all three units simultaneously. We will talk about another configuration later on, but for the moment let's leave it at this. So we have to add, the first one is an extender. So we take the X fader calibration. It's the same I did with the Mackie Control preset. I took the Mackie Control XT, which is for extender, and I added my fader calibration. So I'm going to take this one, and now we have to assign the MIDI ports, which is extender 1 for the inputs and extender 1 for the outputs. Okay, take it. Again. Oh, now we see something happen. We add a new device. The second one is the XTouch. That one. And this is XTouch BA and XTouch BA. And we add a third one. It's our second extender. So we use the Mackie Control XT fader calibration over here and assign XTouch extern 2, XTouch extern 2. So here we are. Okay, we have to have a look to the options. Our first controller defines how many tracks there will be in one bank when switching fader banks. So we decided to have one logical unit, so we have to define for the first units, it's the extender on the left side, 1, 2, 3, 24 tracks, and take it. We don't check the absolute box, we leave it as it is. Here's another box, synchronize with, and I recommend to check nothing here. You can synchronize with the mixer or with the active track, but when we come later to the operation, this will lead to some, I think, effects you don't want to have. You can experiment with these if you want to, but for the time being, let's check nothing. Okay, the second, the XTouch controller, where it's number of tracks, it's always 8 because the controller has 8 fader controls. The bank switch is not important here. We leave it at 8 and on the third as well. So only the first controller defines the amount of tracks for one bank. Okay, we take it and say OK. So We're now going to switch fader banks. We're going to see all three controllers react simultaneously, and we can switch it by banks, or we can switch it channel by channel by channel by channel. But of course, no color on the scribble stuff. Okay, now let's come to the solution how we can add color to that. Going to minimize that. The application I realized is made with Max. Max is a commercial programming environment for multimedia and audio and video, multimedia audio and video applications. And you can download it. I provide the link down the video, but it's not free. It's a commercial tool. You have to pay for it. The good news are, when you download it, you have a 30-day trial, and within this trial period, you can create your own patches, you can load patches, you can run patches, you can save patches. And after the 30 days trial period, you're not able to save patches any longer, but you can load patches and you can run patches. So maybe this is a solution for you. If you don't want to use Max, I'm going to provide a standalone application as well. We're going to talk on this in detail a little bit later. So, when you download my software, let me have a look. Okay, you have to choose. No, we can close this again. You have to choose whether you're going to download the Max version, and you're going to receive a folder with 7 files in it. These two are the patches for Max, so you need Max having installed on your computer. Then you've got 2 Excel files and 3 CSV files. I decided to differ between the possible configurations by realizing 2 separate programs, because it's getting too complicated to have all possible configurations in one app. Maybe someone of you has the time to realize that, but it was very time consuming so far. So I decided to have 2 configurations. The first configuration we are talking about now is to use the 3 controllers as one logical unit. So we have one logical unit or one logical controller, which may consist up to 3 units. And the second one we are talking about a little bit later, 2 logical controllers up to 2 plus 1 unit. So let's take that one. And the first we have to do is to open the Excel file. So configuration 1 logical controller. We're going to open this. And when you open this, you have first to activate macros. I think this message is going to appear every time you open this for the first time. So you have to activate this. And then you're going to see that you have 1, 2, 3, 4 spreadsheets. The first one, the config spreadsheets, the only one where you have to do some configurations. For every track within your project, you have to define the color. The color IDs are mentioned here on the left side, so it's black, red, green, yellow, blue, purple, and light blue and white, with the indications from 0 to 7. As you can see, I prepared up to 128 tracks. So why 128? Why not 96 or 256 or so? I think 128 is sufficient in most cases. Of course, there may be projects which are even larger, and you can change this configuration file for more tracks. It's only a matter of time you have to invest, but it's possible. It's not so complicated, and So I think it's for most project it's sufficient to have 128. You can have less, of course, but you can't have more with this configuration file. You have to modify the file. I already prepared my project, so there's a 6 for track 1 and 2, which is, it's this light blue, then we have 0, which is black, then we have 3 through 3, which is yellow, and so on. And when you configure this, you can do copy and paste, maybe, but you shouldn't do cut and paste, because if you do cut and paste, the reference will get lost, which you need in the next 3 spreadsheets over here. So what's going to happen in the next spreadsheets? For every console, 1, 2, 3, in the order from left to right, Excel is creating rows of color numbers sorry, representing a special order. So when we are going to switch, let's say, our tracks, one track to the right, that means that the color which was on track number 8 before has to appear on track number 7 after the shift, and the color on 7 on 6, and so on. And this is what's going to happen here. You see, this number appears here, this number appears here, and so on. It's diagonal, of course this represents the tracks 1 to 8 in the first row, and the second console represents 9 to 16, and the 17 to 24, and so on. Until we have 128 tracks. These spreadsheets are locked, and I recommend not to unlock them until you know what you're doing, because as you can imagine, if you disturb the formulas behind these fields, it's not going to work any longer. So you have defined all your color names, all your color numbers for all your tracks you're going to use. The tracks you're not going to use, you can leave empty or writing a 0 in it, which is black. There's something more to configure down here, from left to right again. Which kind of controller are you going to use? I use one XTouch in the middle and 2 extenders to the left and right, but perhaps you have 3 XTouch, perhaps, or you have 1 XTouch and the second XTouch and 1 extender. So there are hardware IDs you have to take care of, and the hardware ID for the XTouch is a 20, and for the extender it's 21. Maybe you have heard about 14 and 15, don't know. These are the hex numbers, and these ones, 20 and 21, are the decimal numbers, and we have to enter the decimal numbers over here. So the left one is an extender, so we have to write a 21. The middle, the controller in the middle is an XTouch, so we have to write a 20, and on the right side it's an extender again, so 21. When you have entered all this information, so the color names for the tracks and the controller IDs here, just press Ctrl E. There's a macro behind it, and Ctrl E is going to write 3 CSV files. So it's doing nothing more than taking all these 3 Excel spreadsheets and exporting them individually into a CSV file. It is very important, I didn't mention this before, but it's very important that you have created a special path, because within the macro of the Excel file and within my Max application as well, I used a special path, and the easiest way is to use this path as well. If you want to use another path, you could change the macro within the Excel file, and you could also change the path within the Max file. But for that, you have to use the Max application. If you're going to use the standalone application, for instance, or if you're going to use the Max application after the trial period of 30 days, and you cannot store and save a patch, you have to live with this default path. But I think this is not really a problem. So the default path is, let's show it somewhere else. So this is the path. It's in drive number C, Daten, which is the German expression for data, Daten, and then Max 8 presets. So when you download my files, they will come within a folder called Max 8 presets. Don't change this, and just create a path Daten on drive number C, and copy the whole folder Max 8 presets into that Daten folder. So if you're going to choose another path, you're going to have an error message when starting the macro in Excel, and you're going to have an error message as well when starting my application. So let's assume you're going the easy way and take that path. Okay. So what have we done? We configured with the, I'm going to open it again. We configured, yes, okay. We configured all the colors, and we configured our controllers. And with the Command E, we exported 3 CSV files. We can close this. And you see these 3 CSV files were created. So you could delete these. We can do this, by the way. Just delete them. Pop. So now they're gone. And we're going to execute the macro again. And hopefully, it's the wrong direction. That's the wrong direction. This is the right direction, the directory. So just delete these and executing the macro again. And here we are. So every time you are going to execute your macro, these files are going to be overwritten. So you don't need to take care of these files. When they are gone, you can just recreate them by executing the macro within the Excel file. So now it comes to the little software I wrote. So we're going to start the one logical controller patch. And that's what's going to happen. The large window, I have to check one thing, just a minute. No, that was wrong. Yes, it's closed. Okay. You can put the windows everywhere you want. The large one, the Max console, we do not need them, so we can close this. There are, if you got any error messages, they will appear over here in that window. So we have got no error messages, which are good news. So we're going to close this window. We're going to minimize that one, and we can have a look in detail on this configuration window. So this is the one logical controller configuration up to 3 units, and as I mentioned before, there was the absolute mode in my DAW, so we have to do it the same way here to get it synchronized. So this would be absolute on, no channel switching possible. This is absolute off, channel switching is possible. Okay, now it's important to enter the number of tracks or the amount of tracks in the DAW project. And it must be exactly the name of tracks. So let's have a look on our project. And we're going to the very right end of our project, and I see it's 96 tracks here. You could have any other track number as long as it doesn't exceed 128. I mentioned this before. So it's 96. We have to enter 96. We can just do with the mouse by holding it and pulling the mouse up and down. So it's 96. Hop. Okay. And then we have to enter the same number of tracks for a bank switch as we did in our DAW. So we decided to have 24 because this is logical when we want to use all 3 units as one logical unit, 24. So 24 is the default here. We can have 8, we can have 16, or we can have 24 just by pressing these buttons. But when you're going to start this one logical controller software, it's going to start off with 24. By the way, I earlier mentioned that there's also a standalone application, and there's a possibility of using this one with max after the trial period. So when you do this using this patch after the trial period or using the standalone application, you cannot save. So this would mean every time you're going to start up this application, it will start up with the same default values. So this will be 96, this will be 24. And here, I don't know what was it, or we can check it. Just close it and open it again. No. Okay, we can close this window, and we can close this window. Yes, it's the checkbox is absolute off. So every time you're going to start up, it will start with this default values, and you have to change it. When you're using the Max application, the license one, and you can store presets, you can store this here as well, save, and then it will wake up with your default values. So what have we done? We set bank mode absolute off, 96 tracks, 24 tracks per bank, and then we are going to just click read new data. Ba 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 ba. So what's going to happen? Every scribble strips are getting colored, which is nice, isn't it? It was very impressive for me when I used it for the first time and it worked. It was absolutely impressive. So we're going to change the channel. And as you see, it's doing what I wanted to do. We can change fader banks as well, or channels. Backwards. Oh, I like it. I really like it. It's going to work. It took me some days, as you can imagine, but I'm happy. So we're going to the first bank again. When it's going to happen, for instance, that you forgot to switch this one correctly. So you said, okay, bank mode absolute is on, so I cannot switch my tracks. But in the DAW, you find it's the other way around. So what happened? We're going to switch our channels. You see, the channels are switching because it's defined in the DAW, but the colors are not, because we defined it here not correctly. When this happens, just click it to the right configuration and go to the very first bank, and then it's synchronous again. if there are any other issues with synchronizing between the colors and the tracks, which should not be, for instance, you defined here, let's see, we're going to define not 96, we are going to define only 20, for instance. So what's going to happen? We switch our channels. So, okay, and now when we reach 20, the channels are going to switch again and again, because we have got 96 tracks on our DAW, but the colors will not, because we said no, there are only 20 tracks. So when this happens, you can at any time press read new data, and you will be home again. In this case, you have to go to the first bank first, and then switch read new data. That's how it works in this configuration mode. I want now to talk a little bit about the second configuration mode, which I called two logical controllers. So before we going to do this, we go back to our DAW. We're going to close this. We're going, just to make it clear, to open rtpMIDI and to uncheck the boxes, so we get rid of our colors and we check them again. Here we are, but no colors at the moment. And we're going to enter in our DAW project. So we go into configuration hardware controller, and if we want to use two logical units, and I'm doing this normally, I'm going to use these left two as a one logical controller, where I can have all my tracks in the project, and the right one for VCAs, for auxiliary tracks, for reverb back to the unit, and so on. So it's a little bit like working with the X32 console, so I like to do it this way, but I think everyone has his own way of working, of operating, and you can decide what to do. One word back to the one logical controller configuration. It's no problem when you change the controllers and you say, for instance, okay, let's have the XTouch on the right one and the extender in the middle. You only have to take this in consideration when configuring the XTouch spreadsheet and when configuring going back again, configuring the hardware IDs over here. This is important from left to right, 21, 20, 21. So if you're going to change these two, it must be 21, 21, 20. This is because the SysX message, I didn't mention this before, the color information is sent via a SysX MIDI message to the controllers, is quite not the same. The header is different for the XTouch and the XTouch extender, so we have to take care of this, and then it's no problem to have any configuration you want. When you're going to operate with one logical controller, it's getting a bit more difficult when you're going to use, as we're going to do it now, two logical controller version. Some things are possible and some things are not possible. Just have a look into the hardware configuration. So we're going to lose the last one. Delete, yes. Okay, goodbye. And we're going to add a new one, which I called fader calibration bank select. This is only because when we're going to use these three units as two logical controllers, I need to have buttons for bank and channel select on the right controller. So I have to define buttons I do not need for other purposes. I decided to take the record buttons of the third controller for this purpose. You can, of course, take any other button if you want to. And that's what in this preset XT fader calibration bank select. So I replaced the record function by the bank and track select function. So this one. Within Samplitude or Sequoia, that would mean that it's more or less the same we had. It's one main controller and two subcontrollers. And if we want to define the right one as our own main controller, we have to take this and put it a little bit out or to the left. Whoop. And now it's one controller with one subcontroller and a second controller, which is the right one. So we take care about the MIDI ports. So this was Xturn1, this was basis, and this was of course Xturn2. Okay, take it. And we have to look into the options. Our first controller, this one, we have to define here a bank switch track number, complicated word, of 60. This seems to be logical in this case because we want to use this as one logical controller. Of course you can use 8 as well, so it would shift 8 by 8 by 8, but I think it's useful to have 16 here. Or we'll leave absolute unchecked. So we go into the next controller, which can leave as it is. And the third controller, of course, we want to have a bank of 8, so we can leave as it is. Say, take it, okay. So, when we now going to change our banks over here, it's only going to change the left side with 16, bank of 16, or we can do it track by track by track. And on the right side, we have it here. These are my bank selects, and these are my channel selects. Hope you can see it. So we go to the first bank over here, and we go to the first bank over here. And now we are opening this configuration, file, configuration 2 logical controllers. It looks nearly the same. It is more or less the same. What's not the same is the definition of the console 1, console 2, console 1, 2 and 3 data files, because for the first bank, this is quite easy to understand. I think the data for the first bank of this controller has to be the same as this controller, because this is one logical unit and this is one logical unit. So this is more or less the same. Console 1, it's 66033 and so on, and console 3 as well. And that's the whole secret behind this configuration. So if you want to add more consoles, you can do this by adding more spreadsheets with more formulas in it. It's a matter of time to realize that. I saw a guy on YouTube who owned, I think, 5 controllers, 1 XTouch and 4 extended. So it's open. You can do what you want. Of course, you have to configure and add information within the Max files, and for that you first of all have to know a little bit about Max, and then you have to own the Max software, and you have to write your own files and to save them, of course. So we're going to configure this the same way as we did before. And we have the same color numbers. We have 21 for this unit, we have 20, we have 21, and we are going to say okay, Control E, okay, and there was a problem. Okay, so we opened the file twice. That's not a good idea. Don't save, and we're going to close this, and you open the configuration file again. And just have another try. Control E, yes, no, it's going to work. And it created 3 new CSV files, as you can see here. And now we're going to open the 2 logical controller up to 2 plus 1 unit. Nearly the same GUI. We can close the large window and we can shift this to another place. So it's more or less the same as we already explained. On the left side, bank mode absolute on or off. The amount of tracks, 96, we're going to leave it that way. And now we have got to define the bank switch amount of tracks for our left logical controller, which is this one, 16, and the right one is 8. These are the default values, and as I told you before, when you're going to use the standalone application, or if you don't have the max license, it will awake every time with its default values, and you have to change it every time. Otherwise, you can say just save it, and then it will keep your default values. So, what's remaining? To press read new data. Here we are again, and now we have our left controller, the bank switch, our channel switch, and we have our right controller, the bank switch, our channel switch. So, go to the first bank, and that's it. I'm just going to show you how it's going to work with the standalone application. It's more or less the same. So we're going to close this. Oh yes, when you're downloading the version which is not standalone, just a minute. I deleted the wrong files 30 minutes ago, I think. So, okay. If you are going to download the version which is not standalone, you're going to receive Max 8 presets folder with these 7 files. So these are 2 Max patch files. For that you must have the Max application. The 2 Excel files for configuration and the 3 CSV files, as I mentioned before. If you're going to download the standalone version, you won't have the patch files, but you will have 2 subfolders, and in every subfolder there's a standalone application, this Excel file, and all the resources you need for a standalone application. So when you're going to download this one, you have to be patient, because there's a lot of data stuff. I think 360 megabyte or so. The other one, the Max version, is much how do you say? It's not so big. Okay, it's not so big. It's going much quicker. So we're going to copy these in my work directory. So we're going to close all these files. So, and we're going to delete this ones. And we're going to copy these 2 into my working directory. Will take a little bit. I think you don't have to do this, because you're going to decide whether you want to download the standalone version or the Max version. You can have all these in one directory. This is as well possible, but there will be some messages which may a little bit confusing when having both the standalone and the patch files within one directory, and you're going to start the patch files. Then you will have some messages which may be confusing, although they are no error messages, but only information. So I want to confuse you, so I'm doing it this way. Okay, we're going to try the 2 logical controller unit, and we're going to execute the Excel file. And here we are again. You can close this, we can close this, and we can close this one. And it's going to work the same way as we already experienced. So just let me switch something over here, and we're going to read new data, and nothing is going to happen on the colors. Oh yes, now it is. Okay. So the difference is that within the standalone application you cannot save a file. As I earlier mentioned, you have to live with these default values and to have them adjust every time you're going to use this app. We have to talk about two important things I haven't mentioned yet in detail. The first one is when you are going to use the two logical controller mode, the controller who is only responsible for itself and for its own banks and who is not controlling another controller as well, or another console as well, has to be an extender. This is because of the dedicated MIDI messages of the extender knobs. The other one, so my example was the XTouch in the middle and the extender on the left side. You can have in this order or in another order. This is possible. You have to consider this when configuring the Excel file for the right configuration of the hardware IDs. And you have to take this into consideration when, and this is the second thing we have to talk about, when configuring the MIDI ports. This you have to do once before you first start the Max application. No matter if you're going to use the standalone version or if you're going to use the Max version. And I'm going to show this to you. I'm going to take the standalone version. It doesn't matter. Okay. That was not what I wanted to do. Okay. So we can close these windows. So what you have to do is to configure the MIDI ports once before you first can use the application, and it's located under file MIDI setup in this standalone application. I think in the Max application it's located somewhere else over here. You have to look for it, but it's no problem to find it. MIDI setup. As I told you earlier, my example configuration with the extender on the left side, extender on the right side, and the XTouch in the middle is the so-called normal configuration because I defined it to be normal. That means from left to right you have to configure these with the MIDI ports A, B and C in that order. So that means the XTouch extender 1 is A, the XTouch itself is B, and the extender 2 is C on the input and on the output side as well. If you're going to change the order of your controllers, you have to leave the inside MIDI association as it is, but you have to change the output section. So, for instance, to take that example I just mentioned, two logical controller mode, and you swap the left extender and the XTouch, you have to swap it here on the output side as well. So we're going to change this. So that would be A, and that would be B, and C remains. So just take that on your task list when operating with the software. You have to configure the MIDI ports first according to how you're going to use your controllers and in which order you're going to use your controllers. So for my examples, I explained in this video, it would be going to change it once more. That order on both input and output side. Extender 1 is A, XTouch is B, and extender 2 is C. That's for today. I hope you will enjoy it and have a good time.